The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
Hello, everyone. You know, Halloween is a very strange holiday. Personally, I don't understand it. I don't know, kids worshiping ghosts, pretending to be devils. Things on TV that are completely inappropriate for younger viewers. Things like the following hour. Nothing seems to bother my kids, but tonight's show, which I totally wash my hands of, is really scary. So if you have sensitive children, maybe you should tuck them into bed early tonight instead of writing us angry letters tomorrow. Thanks for your attention.
Stahl has another shorthanded breakaway with Cullen driving the net. Cullen scores! Back to the line, Quincy across for Riley. Riley shot, they score! Koivu tips it in, and the Wild lead it 2-1.
This is Giles and the Goalies podcast. Across the studio from me, I have Ben Remington.
Hello.
And I am your host, Giles Farrell. Mixing it up on the intros today
I
because
was going to say, you threw me off there. I wasn't ready.
my girlfriend thinks it's comedic relief to mock our intro. So, yeah.
Well, see, there's something to be said for consistency, Jamie. So, fans feel all warm and cozy inside when you introduce yourself in the same way every week. They say, hey, these are these guys that I'm familiar with. And it's the same guys, and it's the same show. Because Giles uses a different intro every week.
So I told her today, I was like, I'm going to switch up the intro.
All right. Well, luckily I was on my Ralph Wiggum game, and I didn't drop the ball when he came at me early like that.
She still does a very good Ben Remington. Hello.
It's easy to replicate.
I do have a grind the gears for this week.
You know what really grinds my gears?
That actually we're both going to opine on.
Excellent.
This past weekend, I think it was Friday,
Sure.
the Vegas Golden Knights had their home game, and it was Nevada Day, I believe. They were playing an afternoon game, which I am all for. I am all for distractions in the workplace.
I believe it was 3 o'clock local time for them.
Till 5 o'clock
Right.
Central Time.
Something like that.
And what they did was, as they so aptly pointed out on their cheeky Twitter account, was that they are wearing the white jerseys at home, which is something that you and I are familiar with from our 90s and early 2000s days before the switch.
Yes.
And they said that it was Twitter popular. I disagree. Why do you want to handcuff yourself to wearing white jerseys at home?
You see that as a handcuff?
Yes.
How is that a handcuff?
Well, the argument is wear white jerseys at home. Go back to the old days.
Sure.
But when you want to introduce third jerseys, you can't see those third jerseys at home because they're pretty much primarily color-based.
Well, see, here's the fun thing, Giles, is that you can do whatever you want when you're the home team. So they did whatever they wanted, and they wore white jerseys. If they came out with a bright gold third jersey, as they probably will next year, they could say, hey, the hell were they playing? Colorado? You get to wear white tonight because we're wearing these super flashy gold jerseys, and we're the home team, and deal with it. So I don't see it as a handcuff. I think that there's some flexibility there. I think the NBA has gone a way more flexible route, as we see a lot of teams mixing and matching there because they've got 4 jersey sets for each team now, so they don't have anything for home or away necessarily. But that's just kind of how it is. That's just, I don't know. I don't see it as a handcuff.
See, the NBA is, they're creative thinkers. They'll be like, hey, you want to wear whatever at home? Go right ahead. The NHL, No.
No.
This is an old boys club where we live by the same set of rules forever. So if the NHL were to say, "Hey, we're gonna go back to wearing whites at home," you have to do that. You will only get like one time of year where you can wear your color jerseys at home. Like they will do that. They are very not outward thinking like that.
Well, and see, that's why but them wearing colors at home just furthers that to me. It just furthers their inability to be flexible. Because now they say, home team wears their colored jerseys. That way you can wear your third jerseys at home. That has no flexibility either. You're always wearing your dark jerseys, whether it be your regular dark jersey or your third dark jersey, at home. So that there's some rigidity involved in that as well. I just my argument, and not my argument, it's actually an old argument, and it's the reason why I'm not going to give them too much credit, is the Dallas Cowboys have always worn white at home, despite football's tradition.
Oh, boy.
Because their owners saw that if they wore their blue jerseys at home, every single game to the crowd would be blue against white. Whereas right now, for the Minnesota Wild, every single game at home is green against white. And so that's where I prefer the whites at home because, aside from the tradition aspect of it, which I do enjoy as well, and baseball has held on to that, and I don't think baseball will ever let go of that, is that you've got the Wild playing Edmonton, so it's white against orange. That was a terrible example. You've got the Wild playing against Montreal, white against red. You've got the Wild playing against Tampa, white against blue. It expands your color palette, Giles. It expands your color palette.
I don't like to expand.
Don't you hate pants?
See, now you're the one being NHL-like, stiff and rigidy.
Oof. All right, we can make a whole podcast out of this, but we'll return to this another day.
We could, before any fist fights happen.
Yeah, we'll probably have a summer podcast where we just argue about it.
Various NHL wrongdoings.
But hey, let's review the previous week for the Minnesota Wild. They had three hockey games in a week. Who would have ever thought that this was possible? But they did. And if you watch Tuesday's game against Vancouver, it feels like they played 2 games this week.
Yeah. Or it feels like they played 4 games because that game was so torturous.
Vancouver came to XL Energy Center Tuesday night, and in one of the more lifeless hockey games you will see in a while, the Canucks were the winners 1-0 thanks to a Jake Virtanen goal midway through the third period. I painfully went back and rewatched this game.
Why?
Because I am a glutton for punishment.
You have issues, Giles.
But I went back and I rewatched, and the first 25 minutes of the game, the Wild were doing good. I thought they were generating chances. The Canucks were getting a few chances, but really after that, 25-minute mark, the game really turned into the snooze fest that we all remember it. And
yes,
maybe you and I don't remember that well because we were at unnamed bar and grill unexpectedly.
Yeah. If you didn't follow us on Twitter, fun little instance on Tuesday night. I was actually meeting an old friend from my Sports Authority days.
Was it me?
And so I walk up to the entrance of unnamed bar and grill in Roseville, and I'm literally get on the step to the entrance, and I see a familiar car turn around the corner. And I stop dead in my tracks, and I look at it, and it doesn't take me very long to realize
it's the Batmobile.
That is the Batmobile coming down the driveway, and I just start laughing. And the car stops, pauses before it pulls into its parking spot. When I'm assuming Giles is doing the exact same thing, and then finally parks. We literally pulled into the parking lot within probably 15 seconds of each other, completely unplanned, and it just.
This is what happens when you have to vacate your home for a 7:15 to 8:15 house showing.
Yeah. So it was convenient for me to meet my friend because I was in town this week and all that jazz. But so we ended up watching the Wild game together. I ended up talking with my friend most of the time and kind of keeping an eye on the game. But obviously, I didn't miss much. So there was that.
No, that was the highlight of the game was that we We crossed paths at Unnamed Bar and Grill.
Yes.
Which I think I had one of your friends just tell us the other day on Twitter, just call it what it is.
Yeah.
No. That's not how this works.
They need to pay us for that.
Yes. Pay me my money. Anyway, there's really not a whole lot I took out of this game as I wrote about unzone coverage and created some fancy GIFs. The Wild had chances, but they just could never convert, whether it was, bouncing pucks or just, puck float off the stick or whatever. They couldn't score in that game. And, in the second half of that game, it became blatantly obvious one goal was going to win. And unfortunately, the Canucks were that team. And that is one you would definitely like to have back because you're giving away 2 points to a team that's probably going to finish closer to the bottom of the West this year, even though they're off to a good start. But,
right.
Such is life, I guess. Sometimes you just let one slip away. And Justin Kluse made his NHL debut Tuesday night, and I believe I have encountered the person who has bought edition number 1 of the Justin Kluse 82 jersey.
Good
you
for him.
may remember him on this podcast as the same guy who I branded with the Eric Halla edition number 1 Wild jersey.
Yeah. Yeah.
I live with him.
Yes. So that game, I did end up watching the last half of the third period in earnest at home. And, that was just not a fun hockey game to watch. But you're going to have those. And at least on the bright side, Dubnyk looked relatively sharp. And like you said, they looked like they got some chances. They just didn't convert on any of them. And you're going to have games like that. Obviously, we'll talk about the stat correction that occurred on Thursday night as far as shooting percentage goes. But you're going to have those games. You're going to have the ebb and flow.
Speaking of Thursday night, since we can't get away from that Vancouver game fast enough, the New York Islanders came to XL Energy Center, game 2 of a 6-game homestand for the Minnesota Wild. And the Wild got out to a very fast 3-0 lead. Yeah. In fact, within the first 8 minutes of the hockey game, it was 3-0 Wild thanks to goals from Marcus Foligno, Jason Zucker, and a shorthanded goal from Eric Stahl.
So great.
It was very good. But it turned out to be very far from over. Because usually you see a team get up that big that early, you usually see a foot off the gas kind of a motion, and the team that's down usually makes some kind of a pushback, unless you're the Colorado Avalanche Friday night against the Golden Knights. But the Islanders did manage to always keep it within 2 goals seemingly in this game, but they never got closer than that, and the Wild ended up winning 6-4 in a very good offensive effort. Defensively, much left to be desired. A couple of goals in the last half of the third period from the Islanders when the score was 6-2. I was pleasantly surprised by the offensive juggernaut that the Wild put on. They had 3 players with at least 2 points, and then they had 10 players with each a point in that game. And that was a much better effort, but usually you'd like to shore it up a little bit defensively, especially in the last half of the game at least.
Yeah, it was, those first 3 goals especially. The first 2 were horrific turnovers by the Islanders in their own zone. And I talked about this on, we did a Facebook Live, or I did a Facebook Live on Thursday night after the game.
We do those now. Follow our Facebook page.
Yes, check it out. Where I just basically said, I felt this game taught us more about the Islanders than it did about the Wild, because the Islanders looked bad. I mean, they were bad. And so those first 2 goals were brutal turnovers in their own zone. But credit to the Wild, they capitalized on them. They didn't, it's not like previous years where teams will make mistakes and it doesn't feel like the Wild are capitalizing. The Wild, credit to them, they'd capitalized on those mistakes, and that's what you have to do to win a lot of hockey games. You have to bury teams that are willing to bury themselves, and that's exactly what the Islanders did. I mean, 2 shorthanded goals. Eric Stahl basically put on a one-man show when it came to shorthanded play on Thursday night, getting a goal himself and setting up Luke Cunnin for his first ever NHL goal, both shorthanded. both off of awful turnovers by the attacking power play of the Islanders. And so it was, just one of those games. But I was really happy to see that game. I was really happy to see the Wild take advantage.
Condolences to Islanders fans for having a power play that has scored, 3 goals this year, and they've given up 5 shorthanded goals or something like that.
They're
Basically,
literally worse on the power
they're
play.
giving up more shorthanded goals than scoring power play goals.
Yeah.
But I guess when you have that SUV in the corner of your arena, you get what you deserve.
When you play your hockey in a borough that wants nothing to do with hockey and everything to do with black-rimmed glasses and skinny jeans, I guess. I don't know.
Somewhere Chad Graff sips a cold beverage and smiles.
Banging on the
thinking
glass.
about Islanders fans being miserable.
Banging on the glass. So,
No,
yeah.
that was, and you mentioned Luke Cunnin scoring his first NHL goal. That was a very solid game from him, and we are seeing him, get more and more ice time, and he's a big factor on the Wild penalty kill right now, as noted that his goal came shorthanded, and really you come away more and more impressed every game with Luke Cunnin.
Yeah, he seems to be getting his chances. He finally buried one on Thursday night, but everything looks pretty good with him. He's much more visible than Joel Eriksson Ek has been, which I'm not hating on Eriksson Ek's game. I think his learning curve might be a little bit slower because he is basically this is his not even his first full year in North America. So I think Cunnin had a slightly shorter learning curve, and you're seeing that out of him, having played NCAA hockey last year at the highest level. And so far, so good. Obviously, he was sent down for paperwork reasons after the game on Saturday night, but you got to believe he'll be on the team, for the long term at least until if Zach Parise ever comes back.
And I noted on Twitter Thursday night, Joel Eriksson, he only had 11 minutes of ice time, but I thought he was pretty sharp. He looked very strong on the puck,
Yeah.
which definitely a trait we want to have in the offensive zone.
Right.
But, I think there's still a little bit of a learning curve for him, but, I've been kind of indifferent on him so far this year.
Me too.
But, that's probably better than other players on the roster who I could say for, but.
Yeah, I think if he keeps winning board battles, that seems to be, that was something they commented on last year when he came back. They said, well, he looks bigger. He went back after the first couple of games of the season. He went back to Sweden, and apparently he just spent his entire time in the weight room because he came back and he was notably bigger.
Hey, phrasing!
You went there with it, Giles. I didn't. But yeah, so he came back, and it seems like winning board battles is kind of one of his things now, which is a great thing to have. I mean, it's obviously a good skill. And so it's just, then it's going to be, I think it's going to be him reaching a comfort level with the North American / NHL game before you start seeing some really bona fide scoring chances out of it. I think he has it in him. He seemed to be a dynamic enough offensive player for a teenager playing over in, the Swedish league, which is pretty good.
And then Saturday night, the game that decides our weekly wager from last week. And the defending Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins came to town with a weird high amount of fans who live in the Twin Cities area.
Imagine that. They're all from
You never
Edina.
would have thought of that.
Yeah.
But the Minnesota Wild were the victors in a 2-1 effort at XL Energy Center. Goals from Daniel Winnick and Mikko Koivu give the Wild a 2-1 win. Devin Dubnyk, 29 saves on 30 shots. 2 out of 3 games this week for Dubnyk. Pretty sharp.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Saturday night's game yet. I'm going to do that right when I go home, but
Well, the one
from
goal
what
he
I'm-
allowed, I don't know if you just saw the highlight to that. It went off of Cunnin and then went off of Quincy. So there was
the
literally
super skill
nothing.
double bank shot.
Yeah, even Malkin was like, well, I guess I'll take that one to my credit, I suppose. But about as fluky as you'll see an NHL hockey goal, I will say that.
I want to try this because I was looking up what the analytics said about last night's game. So
Yeah.
I want to quiz you and get your thoughts and see if this matches what the analytics say, just to make people's blood boil out there. Who, in your opinion, was the best line last night against Pittsburgh?
It probably would have had to been the Koivu-Zucker Granlund line. I feel like they had the most. But then again, it might not show up in the analytics because, and that's the kind of the problem you run into with analytics, is they were tasked with the Crosby line a lot. So, analytics doesn't have a column for that. There isn't a shut down the opponent's top scoring line that is insanely talented in the analytics. But I felt like they had a pretty good night. Obviously, Koivu had the game winner, so that is big. But I felt like seeing as how they're the best line the Wild have right now, I feel like they had a pretty good night shutting down Crosby and adding the game winner.
And the analytics say Granlund, Zucker, Koivu was the best line of the night.
Imagine that.
And this is just based on puck percentage-wise.
Right.
Obviously. Crosby, one of the worst Penguins, puck percentage-wise.
Yeah, he got absolutely... you could tell he was a little frustrated. And
at least he didn't yap at the referee for 5 minutes and getting a 10-minute misconduct.
He was basically non-existent on the score sheet. So,
all right, that's all I had on that.
Sure.
But I thought I had another, but I don't know. Just kind of. It's curious to. This may be something I want to try more. Is just look at what the analytics say about the game, and then watch the game, and then see if these thoughts kind of match up, and you kind of make your own thoughts. But I don't know. Something I'm going to try here later this afternoon. But
sure,
we'll see what happens.
Sure.
Nobody likes graphs anyway.
Nerd!
So yeah, that was the week in review for the Wild. A nice 2 out of 3 wins this week. They are now on the season 4-3-2. They are up to 10 points. They finally broke the 10 points barrier that the Vegas Golden Knights hit forever ago. Damn juggernauts. But they have jumped up to 6th in the Central Division. They have moved out of the basement.
Well, they're tied for the basement, but yeah.
Goal differential gives them the edge over the Winnipeg Jets.
Yes.
And they are only 2 points behind the Chicago Blackhawks with 3 games in hand. And 2 points behind the Nashville Predators with 2 games in hand.
Yeah.
So that early schedule layoff, oh, wow. They're also 2 points behind Dallas and Colorado. I would have done good to look up the sheet here. But, the Wild are, 2 points out of essentially second in the division, and they have, at least 2 games in hand on all these teams. And then there's St. Louis, who's way up there with 19 points.
The fighting Yos.
Oh, my God.
So what's funny is that we've seen this out of a Wild team before, right? What St. Louis is doing.
Fast start.
Is St. Louis in the path of a swoon this season? Will they see
Swoon Allen?
Yeah.
That remains to be seen. But if I had $1 for every time a Mike Yeo team got out to a fast start and then nosedived at some point in the middle of the season,
you'd have about $5.
I'd have a lot of dollars.
Yeah,
that would be nice. But then upcoming this week, the week ahead for your Minnesota Wild, a lovely Tuesday night game against the Winnipeg Jets in St. Paul. Always a fun time when the Winnipeggers come on down and yell a lot of things for no reason.
Like True North.
Yes. And then keeping with the Canadian theme, the Montreal Canadiens coast into town on Thursday. The not off to a good start Montreal Canadiens. Montreal is the worst team in the Eastern Conference right now, 3-7-1, if you can believe that. There are some pretty bad teams in the East right now. New York Rangers and Buffalo, only a point ahead of Montreal for worst record in the East, but the Canadiens are the worst team in the Eastern Conference right now.
How? Their GM is so good.
Well, he didn't do himself any favors when he came out last week and said, hey, the problems are on the ice. He basically washed his hands of making any moves.
Yeah.
So to me, that signals, like, if you're a player and your GM just says, hey, I'm not doing anything to fix this, doesn't that, like, deflate morale?
Or it could motivate you, but not in a good way. Like, he basically said, yeah, I put all these players together and they suck. And it's like, well, that reflects on you, buddy. But above and beyond that, if you're a player and you hear that, you're like, okay, so he just said that we all suck, and he's done his job putting together a talented enough team. So it's good. Maybe it might piss you off a little bit,
Well, as the saying goes, this team will only go as far as Carey Price takes them. And in 10 games played, Carey Price is 3-6-1 with a 3.64 goals against average and an .883 save percentage.
Ooh.
That is not good.
Right.
So Carey Price will roll into town Thursday night and pitch a 35-save shutout.
No, see, the Wild don't. They do well against good
that's
goalies.
right. They blow up insanely good goalies, and then they let the backups and third strings bleed
So
them to
what they'll
death.
do is is it Condon still there, the backup?
The backup is Al Montoya.
Oh, that's right. So yeah, they'll start Al Montoya, and he will pitch a 35 save shutout.
That could be. Let me see if Montreal has a game the night before. They do not.
Okay.
Actually, Montreal plays Monday and then is off till Thursday. So
Oh, all right.
I would probably expect Carey Price to start
Yeah.
Thursday night in St.
I
Paul.
don't think so. Do they play it back to back the next night?
Negative.
Probably on
they
Saturday.
go up to Winnipeg.
For Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they play back to back. Anyway. And then the Wild finish out the week, another 3-game week. Saturday night, closing out the 6-game homestand against the ever so hated Chicago Blackhawks.
Boo!
And it looked like Chicago getting out to a good start this year. They were an offensive juggernaut to start the season, at least. They won their first couple of games and they had 15 goals or something like that in their first couple of games, but they have really fallen off here. And they have lost
No way.
3 in a row, 5 out of 6, and 6 out of 8.
That's pretty bad.
That's not good. And they only got points in only one of those losses was an overtime loss.
Yeah.
So they weren't getting any other points when they were losing.
Gotcha.
Not great, Bob.
Yeah, they, we talked about this before the season, how we didn't like the moves they made. And they're still the Chicago Blackhawks, and we realize that. They still have Taves and Kane. They still are pretty good. But didn't like the moves they made. And it's really tough to damn them now because we didn't damn the Wild now. So, but, could be a long season for Chicago because they really didn't put a focus on defense this offseason, and I feel like they're probably going to pay the price for that.
They just got beaten by Colorado 6-3 as Colorado was coming off that vicious 7-0 rout
Yeah.
of the Golden Knights.
Yeah.
Not a good slate here of late for the Blackhawks, but again, because they're not playing well, they'll roll into St. Paul, and you can expect them to look like the dynamic machine that they are.
Right. And to my point, they are tied for second most goals allowed in the West. And nobody's catching Arizona anytime soon.
Well, the numbers on Corey Crawford aren't that bad here to start the year.
Yeah.
935 save percentage. He looks very sharp.
Yeah.
The problem is his backup, Anton Forsberg, which was previously Scott Darling,
Yes.
who's now at Carolina. His save percentage is .895 in 3 starts with a goals against of .426. So not very good results when Corey Crawford gets a night off.
Right. We're familiar with that here.
Yeah, what's that like?
Yeah.
Hey, old pal Darcy had another nice start the other day.
He did? No
Who'da thought?
way. Yeah, I'll write an article about that someday.
We'll save that for a different time.
Yeah.
We'll maybe let him get a third start or a fourth and see
Before
what
I
happens.
start drawing some conclusions from it.
It'd be great when I go out there if I get to see him start.
Oh,
And he
that would be
and
great.
He just has the most incredible game ever.
He was very good at the Staples Center, so.
True. It's probably why he signed there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that is the Minnesota Wild week ahead. Also, kind of looking ahead this week, we saw Mikael Granlund return from injury this last week. Looked pretty sharp Thursday night. Nino Niederreiter appears to be on track for a Tuesday return, and he'll be, fully back up by, the end of the week. So really the Wild are getting back healthier. Obviously, Charlie Coyle still will be out a while. Zach Parise will still be out a while. But, the guys with kind of the minor injuries we're seeing come back. And you're finally letting some of these Iowa guys go back down to Iowa where they need to be.
Right.
But, I think, your Cunnins and Eriksson X, still belong up here in the interim.
Yeah.
Just a nice little injury note to see the Wild getting healthier, and they have done a decent job of treading water here as they have had to deal with all these injuries.
Right.
So yeah, that is your week ahead, and on to our Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
So this came to us, of course, the day after we recorded our last show.
That's always how it works.
And, of course, I expect, always expect a few gems out of Bruce Boudreau during a week. But, this one was obviously great enough when he was asked on Granlund's return Monday. He was making his first game back Tuesday night against Vancouver.
Right.
He was asked, what has it been like waiting for Granlund to return from injury? He said,
It's like having a baby. There's so many false alarms. It's the first analogy that came to my mind. Having a baby. It's stupid. When your wife is having a baby, you say, I think I'm having it, and it's a false alarm. But shut up. That's pretty stupid. That's pretty good, actually. I got a lot of stupid stuff today.
Absolutely. Your top scorer from last season is back, and that's he played one game, or half game at that. So, totally understandable and relatable for Jason Zucker as well.
Baby Zucker. Oh my! It's interesting to see how affectionate Boudreau has become for Granlund here in just a season and change, and. I forget who noted this, but somebody noted how Boudreau's always been, a big player kind of a guy. You're 6'4", 220, 230
Right.
kind of a guy. And here you got Granlund, who's 5'10", 190, soaking wet. And, he's become his favorite player on this team. And it's just kind of an interesting change for him. And definitely not complaining about it, because Granlund arguably was their best player last year, with leading the team with 69 points.
Nice.
But and he had a very sharp return performance Thursday night. Definitely nice to see that.
Yeah, no, he had a nice goal with Zucker there, setting him up, threading a beautiful pass across the slot for Zucker. So good to see him back on track. And my article for Friday, I picked the 3 stars for the month of November, and Granlund was one of them, because I feel like he, back in the fold again, back with Koivu and Zucker. They've got the band back together, and so it will be a good month of November for Granlund.
Good thing I read that article before asking if it was dated wrong.
That was very entertaining.
Thankfully, that was behind closed doors.
Yes, it was. Oh, good stuff.
No, so that is your Bruce Boudreau quote of the week. And on to our special guest.
Yes.
All right, joining us on the podcast today is the NHL.com correspondent for the Minnesota Wild, and that is Jesse Pierce. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me.
As Ben and I were just kind of talking about 10 games here into the season, the Wild they've done a pretty reasonable job of treading water here, considering all the injuries they had. But how have you felt they've done here in their first 10 games of the year?
You know what I have to say? I have been fairly impressed with the depth that they have shown. I mean, like you said, the injuries are not just to a few players; they are to literally every key player that they have for each of their four lines. So, I think all things considered, with those injuries and those players out, they have done fairly well, especially in their past four games. I mean, obviously a big win against Pittsburgh on Saturday night, and then another big win against the Islanders. I think we're finally starting to see a little bit of that Minnesota team from last year. You know, I think they're starting to get that confidence back, and I think as they continue to build that confidence, you're only going to see them get better and better, and hopefully get a couple more wins here too.
And you mentioned the depth we kind of talked about last week. You know, maybe an underrated day in free agency, the underrated signings in free agency Chuck Fletcher had was on July 1st when he signed, I believe it was like 6 guys to minor league contracts, and I believe we've seen at least half of those guys that get a call up to the NHL here early on.
Right. Yeah. You know, absolutely. I mean, and I think Fletcher has consistently done a pretty decent job at getting some good guys into the Minnesota system and making sure that they really get that time in Iowa that they need. I think that speaks volumes to the players that end up transforming into to key players up in Minnesota, as the guys that are working hard in Iowa and making sure that they're getting that time. You know, Zach Mitchell is a big one. I mean, we saw him get his first goal the other night too. I think he's finally starting to come around, and he's getting the looks that he deserves. And I think we're only going to continue to see more and more of those guys down in the minors get some time, especially as these injuries, you know, have these guys out for a little bit longer than most fans would like to see. But obviously, it provides more opportunities for those guys in Iowa too.
Yeah. So you know, we saw the game last night. We saw them, you know, fare pretty well against Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh wasn't happy with their overall effort, and I think the Islanders on Thursday probably fall in the same category. What did you feel like from those two games? Do you feel like we learned anything about the Minnesota Wild? I came away maybe feeling like I learned a little bit more about the struggles of the Islanders and the Penguins during those two games.
You know, I would have to say I do agree with you on that. I think we definitely showed some glaring problems for those two teams more than we showed some promise for necessarily the Minnesota team. You know, obviously Pittsburgh struggled with their 5-on-5 game a little bit last night, and then New York's power play unit is a big problem for them as they move on. And I think Minnesota took advantage of that, which is definitely a good thing. It's something that every team wants to do. But I agree. I think it's more or less the opposing teams had those big letdowns. But then credit to the Wild is that they capitalized on that, and I think they, you know, were able to jump in and get the goals that they needed when they did. Which I think is obviously the most important aspect of the game is getting the goals when you can, especially for a team that can tend to struggle to shoot the puck and score as they have done so often in the past. But I think that as the season moves forward here, and we see quite a few more games as they are every other day now here for the next week especially, I imagine that Minnesota will start to transform into their own team. I think they're still trying to find an identity because they have those injuries and they've got so many new guys coming up and down and back and forth. So I think it's hard to say that, you know, this Minnesota team has found, you know, this way to win or this way to win. I think it's more or less winning however they can, you know, against every team that they can, if that makes sense.
Sure. And what I mean, you're around the team enough, obviously. What do you think is the mood around the team as far as it goes with these injuries? Are they overly positive about it, or are they just kind of, you know, taking a lunch pail mentality to it?
I think it's more, like you said, the lunch pail mentality is a good way. I mean, obviously, a lot of those guys, they're very good at putting a facade on in front of the media, so they're definitely not too transparent. But I think they also realize that this does happen to teams. I mean, they've been, you know, unfortunately, it's happening to them all at once, it seems, but they also recognize that they're lucky in the sense that it's happening early on in the season when the points aren't necessarily, you know, a must-have. You know, I mean, obviously you always want to build up as many points as you can, but I think they're going to work and they're working with what they have and making it work when they can and while they can.
When you kind of, you know, talk about, you know, the team just having a lunch pail mentality with all these these injuries. What was kind of the mood around the team after it was announced Zach Parise had, his back surgery finally? Was there like a relief, or was there, this kind of frustrating? What were they all kind of thinking on this?
I would say definitely relief. I mean, obviously, the players, they're a team. They all support each other, and they want everyone to be healthy and be able to play as much as they can. I think it was more relief for Zach. I mean, that he was finally able to kind of put an end to this nagging back injury that he's been battling for the past couple seasons here. So I think it was more or less they were happy for him to get that kind of out of the way, and then really just moving forward and knowing that, okay, we don't have him on the roster anymore for the next couple months here. Let's just move on and fill in for that missing piece. So I don't think that there was necessarily any frustration by any means. I mean, like I said, they all support each other. And again, it goes to how they act in front of us media. But I definitely think they were happy that Zach made the decision. I know Bruce had outright said that, I'm just happy Zach made a decision on this. And I think that's how most of the team felt as well.
So as we're, kind of ending October here for the Wild, has there been kind of a player on the team who's maybe jumped out at you that you might not have otherwise, thought would have this kind of a good start to the season?
I mean, I think everybody would tell you Chris Stewart. I don't know the person that has typically looked at Chris Stewart as, oh my goodness, let's get a goal from this guy. I think he's definitely elevated his game. I think he's stepped up, and as a veteran player, knew that he really needed to step up. I mean, you even asked him if he would have ever expected a start to the season, and he's told us, all of us in the media, absolutely not, but he'll take it any way he can. I think he's definitely impressed, though, and I think it's not necessarily even been just him being in the right spot at the right time. I think he's really worked for a lot of those goals. And Eric Stahl, too. I mean, we saw Eric Stahl do incredibly well last year, but I think this year, and I don't know if it's because I'm particularly noticing him more with some of those key guys out, but I think just the way that he sets up the plays and moves the puck has just been really, really impressive to me, even more so than what I had seen out of him last year, which was also a great season. So I would say those two players, as far as on the veteran side, and then obviously Luke Cunnin, for a rookie kid coming in here and kind of just being tossed in to the lineup and expected to do some big things. I think he's done tremendously well, and it was great to see him get his first NHL goal the other night as well.
We've heard nothing but great things about him as far as from a makeup and a maturity standpoint. Have you had a chance to talk to him yet much?
I have, yeah. And I think, like you just mentioned, the maturity, I think that's what really stands out to me. I mean, he doesn't seem really nervous at all in the locker room or on the ice. There's just kind of this comfortable feeling that he has in the NHL, which I think is huge. I think a lot of these young guys that get called up, there's obviously nerves associated with that, and that's completely understandable. But for him, he just seems to be very comfortable being put in and thrust into this position. So I think that's what makes him such a different player, and that's what's going to really carry him throughout the season and make him be kind of a key guy coming in here.
I think it was all that experience playing big-time Big Ten college hockey is what it was.
That must have been it, absolutely.
We'll just give you kind of a couple more questions here before we let you go.
Yeah.
They have a couple of big games this week, at least in terms of the Central Division. They got the Jets on Tuesday night, and then the Chicago Blackhawks, a game everybody circles on the calendar, Saturday night. Is the team, do they kind of get cut out ahead looking at, these games as a whole, or are they just trying to still just chip away at them, kind of one by one?
I think they definitely go one by one. I think you have to do that almost. I don't think you can look too far ahead. And obviously you have your game circled on the calendar. I'm sure the players, just as the fans do, have that Chicago game circled, and they kind of get up a little bit more for that. But I do think right now for them, because they fell a little bit behind to start the season, I think they know that every point matters and every game matters, even right now. So I think it's just game by game. And especially as they start to get players back here, I mean, it looks like Nino Niederreiter should make a return on Tuesday, which will be huge for the Wild lineup. Again, hasn't been confirmed, but he's been practicing with the team, and he's ready to go. And I think Bruce is ready to get him back, and it looks like Tuesday might be the day. So as they get those guys back, I think you got to take it game by game and see who you're playing with too. So I think that'll be important, and it should be an exciting week for them.
And what just kind of looking at a broader, down the line here, what are your general feelings on the Wild this season? We're still pretty early on. I don't think we've learned, like as you said, we haven't quite gotten an identity out of this team. We haven't really learned much aside from them persevering these injuries. What are your feelings on the Wild season on the whole?
I don't want to disappoint Wild fans. I don't know that it's going to be, as successful as it was last year. I mean, last year was an incredibly great year for Minnesota. I mean, a record franchise record in points, and I mean, just an incredible season. And that feat's a little bit hard to replicate. Not everybody's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not everybody can, consistently do what some of these teams have done. I think them battling through these injuries, like I said, does speak a lot to the character and the hard work that they're going to do. But I don't know that it's going to necessarily. I know every fan out there would love to hear that the Wild are going to advance in the playoffs past the first round. I don't see that happening just yet. I think they're still just missing a couple pieces here and there. And again, I think it'll be easier to get a better sense once some of these guys get back, once Niederreiter's back, once Coyle's back, if that comes back here as well. I think that will definitely tell a little bit more, but I don't see it being a better season for Minnesota than last year, unfortunately. And that's my humbled opinion, but
Sure.
That's kind of where I sit from where I sit. I see.
So we love to pick out kind of a Bruce Boudreau quote of the week, since he's such a quotable character on an almost everyday basis. What's it like to just kind of work with him on almost a daily basis?
Bruce is great. He really is. He's a great guy. I mean, obviously he gets in his moods where I think everybody in the media might kind of be like, okay, well, Bruce is having a mood. Let's, tread a little bit lightly. But he is, and like you said, he has those great quotes. I mean, you're always guaranteed to leave a press conference with something to use, and even if it's something lighthearted or funny. And I think my favorite thing about Bruce is he tells it like it is. He's not going to mince words. I mean, just this week he had called Granlund the best player, hands down, on the team, and he's not necessarily incorrect on that. And then earlier, even before that, this week, he admittedly said that the Wild are a mediocre team. And again, he probably wasn't wrong in that assessment. So I think you have a love-hate relationship with his honesty. I mean, you love it, and obviously he'll tell you like it is, and so you hate it sometimes too. But I do. I've always had a great experience with him, and he's a funny guy and a nice guy, and I enjoy having him as the coach of this team.
Since you're also kind of somebody who is around the team a lot, is there kind of a behind-the-scenes story you could share with us? Like I told you, kind of leading up, like Chad Graff talked about stumbling on Ilya Bryzgalov and Russian politics, and Evan Sporer told us about how Ryan Suter pulled him into the players' room to eat after Yom Kippur because he hadn't eaten in like a day and a half.
Oh, geez. That's so tough. I guess my favorite, and this is probably just even more of a personal, exciting thing. So I had my first child earlier this year, right before the season started, and I had to go back to work and get some quotes. So I took my son, who was 3 weeks old at the time, with me to do some interviews, and carried him in and just kind of did work as was, and didn't really address the baby in the room necessarily and say anything about the kid. And Mikhail Granlund, actually, the funniest thing, after the interview was done, he kind of rushed through the interview. And if anybody really knows Granlund or has seen him, super great guy, but he's very serious, and he doesn't show a whole lot of emotion. It might be the Finnish thing, because I think Koivu's kind of the same way. There's, not much emotion shown, not excitement or anything. And the interview gets done, and oh my gosh, Granlund's face just lights up, and he goes, "Oh, and who is this little guy?" And he was just so excited to talk baby, which I thought was even more hilarious because, to my knowledge, he's not married or with a kid. So to see this young kind of guy get so excited about this little kid was kind of funny to me, especially when I don't see emotion from him in any other sense. So I think that would be kind of my one story. Again, very touching to me, but I thought it was kind of funny too. Everybody kind of commented on how excited Granlund was. Like, why was he so pumped about that? Like, I have no idea, but that was awesome.
Add it to Granlund's list of weaknesses, babies.
Yes, exactly.
His weaknesses are Dustin Bufflin and babies.
Right.
So our final two questions here. Ben and I go back and forth on these just about every show, seemingly. But the first of which is, since we're big hockey jersey fans, do you have a particular favorite from all time, or if you can't narrow it down like us, do you have like a Mount Rushmore of jerseys?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I'm a sucker for the North Stars jerseys. I particularly like the white one. But I mean, any of them would do. I really do love that. Actually, I just received for a birthday gift last year a Charlie Conway Mighty Ducks jersey as well, which is probably one of my favorite jerseys. I mean, I've got a most girls collect shoes. I collect jerseys, so I do have a closet full of jerseys, and that Conway jersey was probably one of my most favorite that I've received yet. There's also the Iceland jersey from that movie, which I think would be kind of cool to have, just to have it.
The Gunnar Stahl jersey, I believe.
Yes, the Gunnar Stahl, exactly. But even as far as a real team, I've got a couple of Team USA jerseys too. Yeah. I don't have any of the old school, like 1980 USA jerseys, or even before that from the 60s. I think that could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I would say I definitely am a sucker for the older ones. The new ones look great. I think the new Minnesota Wild jerseys look awesome. Mm-hmm. But give me an old sweater any day, and I'd be a happy girl.
Awesome.
I think I agree on all counts there.
Yeah, we're big we're big Mighty Ducks fans as well. So you hit the nail on the head with us there.
Yep.
And then our final question for you. It's a little bit off the board, but Ben and I also get a lot of food questions, which is weird, into our mailbag. But the original question that started all of this was, do you consider soup to be a meal?
No.
Yes.
I don't.
Swish.
I don't, I think it's great. I just don't know that it can ever completely fill you up. You have to have like grilled cheese with it, or you have to have some sort of something else. So I feel like it's a side.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fair. Ben needs it.
I needed that win after Craig Custins completely shot me out of the sky with the soup question. I needed that. I needed that small moral victory right there.
Yeah, there you go. I'm happy to provide that.
Thank you very much.
Jesse,
is there anything you'd like to plug before I let you go, or where can people find your work?
You can follow me on Twitter at Jessie @JESSI_Pierce PIERCE. I write for a variety of different outlets: the NHL, the Athletic, Minnesota Hockey, USA Hockey. So most of my work can just be found right on that Twitter. And again, I appreciate you guys having me on.
No, thank you for joining us, and we'll definitely have you back on again down the line.
All right, sounds good, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
So that was fun. Thank you to Jesse again for joining us. I think we were most enlightened at Mikael Granlund, Baby Whisperer. So on to our weekly wager segment.
That's your bet, sir.
Ah, yes, the bet. Okay, what the hell? It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
So you may recall last week, Ben and I wagered on how the Wild would do this week. So if it was 1.5 wins or less for the Wild, so essentially a win.
Right.
Ben was the victor, and anything over, I was the victor. So, of course, it came down to Saturday night against Pittsburgh, and the Wild win signaled that I had won, and the wager was the winner had to write a written statement for the loser to read, and Ben will read his statement now.
All right. Giles is great. His food choices are second to none. Hockey knowledge is good too, but he is clearly the authority on food, soup in particular.
It's a good statement.
I hope you enjoyed that. You're lucky that I'm flying high on the Jesse Pierce being on the soup is not a meal train. Otherwise, that would have been a lot more painful for me to read.
Yeah, you really needed a pick-me-up after Custins.
I did. Custins
just took a bat
savaged me, man. He made me feel like I was a child.
That was Stewie Griffin, Where's My Money bashing.
Where's my money? You gonna give me my money?
It actually kind of was. And from a national guy, too, from a big-time athletic guy. Jeez.
Or maybe that was just Craig rewarding me because I did buy his book.
That's true. You did buy his book, and I hadn't. So
our weekly wager for this week, since Ben and I are avid baseball fans, we are going to wager on the outcome of the World Series.
Yes.
Which, as we record, is currently tied at 2 between the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Game 5 will be tonight, a Sunday night, and then Game 6 and 7 later in the week. I am going to take the Dodgers on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think even if the Astros win tonight in Game 5, I think the Dodgers will win the next 2 at home. Houston has just been completely abysmal on the road this postseason, outside of Game 2 in this World Series.
Fair.
But I'm going with the Dodgers because they've also got Clayton Kershaw going tonight in Game 5, and I have no doubt with the day off he's going to come back in Game 7 if there's a Game 7.
Yeah,
so
I would probably think so, too.
And I love watching Clayton Kershaw pitch.
Yeah.
So
as much as I love Justin Verlander, only having him for one more game is going to be tough. But, I still like the Astros. I still want the Astros to win because they haven't won a World Series before, and as much as the Dodgers, it's been 29 years since they've won a World Series title. 28. It was 88, right? Or 89?
I thought they won in 89.
Yeah, I think you're right, 89. Anyway, so yeah,
don't make me that old.
Anyway, I'd rather see the Astros win. I've got family. My stepdad is from Houston, and his family's from Houston. I'm not like a closet Stros fan or anything, but I would like to see them win. I think obviously for that town, that would mean a lot right now. So, but I think it's gonna be a great series. I'm actually very excited to see that series go 7. I really hope it does go 7, and if Kershaw goes on short rest for Game 7, that could be amazing.
And I will say, Houston's been a very fun team to watch. Very likable team, maybe outside of one of their outfielders. I forget his name.
Puig?
No, not Puig. The Astros outfielder.
Oh, Springer?
No, I like George Springer. I
Oh.
forget his name. Anyway.
Reddick? Marwin Gonzalez.
No.
Those are the 3. Okay.
The guy who made the racist gesture at you, Darvish.
Oh, that was their first baseman, Yuli Gurriel.
Oh, I was close.
Yeah.
First base, outfield. What's the difference?
Sure.
At least to the Twins with Joe Mauer, am I right? Ba-dum-bum.
So yeah, we actually didn't decide what we were wagering on this. We should have done that ahead of time. What are your thoughts? I've kind of called my shots a lot here.
Should we just wager another beverage? Because I think we'll try and.
Well, you're behind on a Jagerbomb.
Yeah, so we'll just wager a beverage.
Okay.
And then I'll lose and we'll just double down. And everyone likes that.
Yes, that makes for good podcast.
And good Facebook Lives.
Yes, that too.
My girlfriend was kind enough to ask me, what was your alcohol intake before that Facebook Live on Tuesday?
It was a fair amount. I cannot confirm nor deny the number of beverages consumed, but there were beverages consumed.
Yeah, there was a few.
There were
it
refreshments
It wasn't
served.
bad. Yeah, I was tame in comparison. Anyway, so yeah, that will be our wager of the week.
All right,
and we will check back in on that next week. The tallied, as I tweeted out from the podcast Twitter account, is on the season. I have 3. You have 1. And again, we have the at-large one, the one that will make all the other ones look bad. the Timberwolves bet. You can check out our first show of the season.
Right.
For that. I also was tweeting that from a haunted house in Iowa.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
So appreciate my commitment to the...
You were physically in a haunted house when you tweeted that?
I was outside of one.
Okay, yeah. Because I was going to say that would be distracting.
Yeah.
All right. How was the haunted house? Was it good?
It was all right. It was almost like a theme park of haunted houses. There's like 5 of them. So, yeah.
I don't have much experience with haunted houses because it's not my thing at all. I've been to the one at the state fair. Have you been to that one?
I think I did.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, there's just too much to do at the state fair as is. So,
True,
like, I never get in there.
I never was big
but,
on that either.
Like,
I went to it once.
I'm always fine with haunted houses, but as I like learned last night, like, there's just so much strobe lights just like make my eyes go.
You're more likely to leave with epilepsy than you are scared. Yeah.
For somebody who had a history of seizures when he was 4 years old, that might not be a good thing.
Oh yeah, no, dude, don't do that.
No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we
Jesus.
we learned a lesson.
Yeah, no kidding.
Nothing bad happened, I swear.
Okay, good.
Anyway, on to jerseys.
Sweet.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
So our team of the week this week is the Montreal Canadiens. And in this segment this year, we are imagining what a third jersey would look like for them next year because Adidas only has a straight home and road set.
Right.
And if you look at the history of the Montreal Canadiens, you will not find a third jersey unless it is for a outdoor game.
Right. Which is totally understandable.
And as Ben and I were talking about beforehand, their last jersey change of significance came in 1966. So, or I'm sorry, 1960.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not expecting the Montreal Canadiens to roll out a third jersey.
No, and I hate to say this as a jersey fanatic, I don't think they should. I mean, I just don't see the, it's kind of like the Yankees. It's kind of like, I guess you could say
Dodgers.
The Dodgers as well. Kind of like the Pittsburgh Steelers. It just, there's certain teams where
iconic looks.
Right. They're so iconic. Just don't mess with it.
And they haven't, to their credit.
Right, and actually, the only change they've made recently is they added ties. As I have around my hoodie right now, they added ties to their jerseys a couple of seasons ago, which is a huge change for them. As far as relatively speaking. So I don't know. Is there any kind of even slight, teeny tiny tweak you would like to see out of the Canadians?
No.
No.
Like even. Like, I don't know if you noticed this, but I didn't notice this till I got my Carey Price jersey.
Uh-huh.
But the NHL shield
is
on
LNH.
the jersey is LNH.
Yeah.
It's the French, National Hockey League spelling, and
right.
So I appreciate their attention to detail there. So no, I wouldn't change anything, even though their hockey team is an absolute tire fire right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I don't think I would have them change anything at all. I don't know. I mean, I really do. I do like the little touches like the LNH. I think the adding ties to the front of jersey is all right. That's not like a earth-shattering change at all, I don't think. I don't know. I think if they did do a slight tweak, I would probably be okay with it. I wouldn't hate it if they change something like, a little stripe here or a little something there or something like that, as long as it's not like piping or something awful. I'd probably be fine with it. But for the most part, just kind of leave the jerseys alone. You've got such a great look going.
Yeah, no, don't change anything. Just leave it. And again, huge marks for not adding some kind of weird jersey in the 90s, as we have no doubt
covered a gazillion times. Yeah, don't do it.
So no, that'll be it for the jersey segment this week. I promise we have better weeks ahead in which we can, find a little bit more intelligent discussion on that. But when you're kind of handcuffed to the Montreal Canadiens, who've had the same jerseys,
kind of a week off
for 20 years, 30 years that pre-existed my existence.
Right.
Yeah. That's not changing anytime soon.
No. Nor should it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, any final thoughts that can probably wrap it up for us this week?
It comes back to, I was just thinking about this morning, after the Wild having 2 out of 3 victories this week, they seem like they're a little more back on track. Nino's back next week. Granlund's back now. It feels like they kind of made it out of they weathered the storm a little bit. They weathered the swoon storm a little bit, not coincidentally. And it kind of goes back to the people who are freaking out and calling it a swoon right off the bat and saying, oh, God, they're playing so terrible. Everyone's hurt. It's going to be a swoon. It's going to be a swoon. And I wrote that article a couple of weeks ago for Zone Coverage naming swoons. But really, I think the most important part of that article is kind of defining what a swoon is. And it would be losing more than 70% of your games in a 10-game or more stretch. And, looking back at it, they didn't really particularly come very close to that. So I think patience kind of persevered there. I think level heads, not to pat us on the back necessarily, but there's a lot of people that were a little panicked, and I think I'm glad that it's over now. I'm glad they're just kind of probably going to ebb and flow a little bit.
You feel that a couple swoon questions.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and it's like they're not in a swoon, and the thing about a swoon, you won't know until you're almost through it anyway. Like, you can lose a couple in a row, and they lost a couple kind of to start the season, not in a row, but it just kind of worked out for them. So have some patience. This team is the Walking Dead, and they're getting through it. My
final thought is, as I also kind of alluded to, the Wild are right there in the standings. They only are listed as 6th in the Central, but they're 2 points essentially. 3 points out of second in the division with games in hand. So it might take a while for those games in hand to even out, but as you said, they're starting to maybe get on a roll a little bit, and once they do, they'll certainly jump up the standings as teams in this division are starting to flounder a little bit. Mm-hmm. Dallas is not doing particularly well right now. Colorado is, going to regress at some point, let's be honest.
It's Colorado.
Chicago is not playing good right now.
No.
Nashville is, they're just kind of, laying in the weeds again, kind of similar to how they started last year. Don't freak out yet. I think, kind of said better days are ahead, and, let's go into November, and we should be all right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I think, like I said, it'll ebb and flow, but that's going to ebb and flow. I mean, we're not looking at, they survived the beginning of the season without a swoon. I don't necessarily expect them to now. I mean, now is the type of year actually where Devin Dubnyk heats up a little bit, and we've seen a decent week out of him, and maybe you'll start to see, he's had very good numbers in the month of November and the month of December, not only with the Wild, but previously, excluding his Oiler days, I suppose, which nobody had good numbers. So, but it's that time of year where this team kind of kicks it into gear a little bit, and Devin Dubnyk is the reason why. So, look forward to that, I guess.
Something to look forward to next month is they get a matchup with the unstoppable Vegas Golden Knights.
Yes, they do.
At XL Energy Center.
Yes.
So, look forward to that.
The return of Holla.
I like when my Twitter followers point out when he scores.
They're so helpful.
Yeah, it just gives me the feels. No, that'll wrap it up for us this week. We will be back again next week. I believe Ben is back to a traveling schedule this week, so
I am.
Expect a plethora of Facebook Live recaps from me this week.
Probably.
So. But yeah, follow our Facebook page. We are trying to do some quick hitter Facebook Live recaps after every game, just to kind of capture our raw emotions from said game. And
yeah,
I definitely did a great job of that, as I rambled about nothing until my oven timer went off on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I tried to keep mine short on Thursday night, and then I look back and I realized I had 8 minutes, and I was like, wow, that was quick. So Saturday night though, 2.5 minutes, so very quick hitter-ish. Something you can definitely watch on your first break at work.
Yeah. So that's facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. We have a Twitter account at GATG Wild Podcast. We have an Instagram account at GATG Wild Podcast.
Consistency.
Yes.
It's the name of the game.
You can now find our show on Google Play.
Yes.
If you did not catch our announcement earlier this week, you can also find us on Stitcher, Libsyn, iTunes. Please leave us an iTunes rating. We are an otherwise fine podcast.
It gets me every time.
You can find Ben and I writing at zonecoverage.com/wild, where we also write with Heather Rule, who is doing a marvelous job at pregame articles and postgame articles.
Yes.
So yeah,
she is the professional of the group.
Yeah,
that's no question about that.
I'm not even trying to debate that.
You know, it's funny. So we had the zone coverage meeting just kind of just briefly, and Sam Ekstrom, one of our zone coverage fellows, talked about the difference. You know, how we cover and our, you know, with getting Heather credentialed and all that. So he talked about how she was the pro of the group, and then he called me the columnist. Which I just reacted in such disgust right away because obviously not nice things said about columnists in this market from myself even.
Man.
And yeah, I don't think we have a defined role for you, but you do. You're more of you specialize in the internet stuff where you can do GIFs and break down plays, and that's great because you're not.
I really love doing GIFs.
Yeah, no, that's obvious, but there isn't really that's not a newspaper role, and that's maybe why newspaper coverage is dying.
I'm the in between to Heather's professional to your columnist. I'm so going to open the show next week with our resident columnist,
Zone
Ben
coverage
Remington.
wild columnist, Ben Remington. Oh, woof.
No, I think I hit it all. So yeah, again, check us out, zonecoverage.com/wild. In fact, just go to zonecoverage.com. We've got you covered on all Minnesota sports.
Yeah, I mean, every other sport they've got, I mean, a real legit beat writer. We're not able to with the Wild, unfortunately, but Brandon Warren does great work with the Twins. We added Tim Fakeless this year covering the Wolves 24/7, and it doesn't get much better than Arif Hassan covering the Vikings. So
who was just in London?
Yes,
covering the
live
Vikings.
from London.
He did a great job until his phone bricked on him.
Yeah,
so
that sucks.
Send Arif $1 or something.
Yeah, no kidding.
He'll appreciate it. But nope, that'll wrap it up for us this week. Ben and I will be back next week for a wonderful new edition of Giles and the Goalies podcast. So we will catch you again.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.